Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, no matter how deep you think you've put it, or how many years of ordinary living you pile on top of it like dirt on a coffin. Sometimes it comes knocking at your door at 1:45, wearing the face of someone you thought you'd forgotten, someone you had trained yourself not to think about because thinking about them made you feel like the worthless piece of shit you probably were back then. And maybe still are now if you're being honest with yourself, which most people are. And because being honest with yourself is the hardest goddamn thing in the world. Sarah Chen learned this lesson on a rainy Tuesday night in October, when the past came calling in the form of a text message from a dead girl, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you about Sarah first, because you need to understand who she was before the haunting started. Before Emma Martinez reached out from whatever dark place the dead go, when they have unfinished business with the living. Sarah was 28, worked in marketing for a mid-sized firm in Portland, Oregon, lived alone in a studio apartment that cost too much, and had thin walls that let her hear her neighbor's television at all hours. She had what her mother would have called a comfortable life, which is the kind of damning with faint praise that mothers specialize in when their daughters turn out to be disappointingly ordinary. Sarah made decent money, had decent health insurance, drove a decent car that she'd bought used from a dealer, who smiled too much and probably rolled back the odometer. She dated occasionally. Nice men who worked in tech or finance. Men who wore their loneliness like cologne and talked too much about their CrossFit routines or their thoughts on cryptocurrency. These relationships never lasted long, not because the men were terrible, though some of them were, but because Sarah carried around a peculiar kind of emptiness that made it hard for her to connect with people. She felt like she was missing some essential piece of herself, some component that other people had that allowed them to form lasting bonds. Her therapist, Dr. Rebecca Marsh, would have called this attachment issues stemming from childhood trauma, but Sarah had never been able to identify any particular childhood trauma. Her parents had divorced when she was 16, but the divorce had been amicable, civilized even. Her father had remarried a woman named Linda who tried too hard to be Sarah's friend. And her mother had thrown herself into a real estate career with the intensity of a convert finding religion. Sometimes Dr. Marsh had said during one of their sessions, trauma isn't about what happens to us. Sometimes it's about what we do to other people. Sarah had laughed at this. One of those uncomfortable laughs that people make when someone has struck too close to home. What terrible thing could I have done? I was just a kid. But Dr. Marsh had given her that look the one therapist's perfect in. Graduate school, the one that says they know you full of shit, and they willing to wait as long as it takes for you to admit it. Sarah had stopped seeing Dr. Marsh after that session. So there she was on that rainy Tuesday night, lying in bed and scrolling through her phone like a digital age rosary, thumb moving in the eternal swipe of the blessed and the damned, when the message came through. It was 11:47 p.m., and Sarah would remember that time for the rest of her life, however long that turned out to be, because 11:47 p.m. is when everything changed, when the careful edifice of her ordinary life began to crumble like a sandcastle at high tide. The message was from an unknown number with a local area code. Sarah, I need your help. Something terrible is happening. Please respond. Emma. Sarah sat up in bed, frowning at her phone in the blue glow that had become modern humanity's version of a campfire. The light we all gathered around to tell ourselves stories about who we were and who we wanted to be. Emma. She didn't know any Emma. At least not any Emma who would be texting her at 1:45 about something terrible happening. She typed back, I think you have the wrong number. I don't know any Emma. The response came back almost immediately, and there was something desperate about how quickly it arrived. Like whoever was on the other end had been waiting by their phone, counting the seconds. Please don't pretend you don't remember me. I'm scared, Sarah. They're coming back. A chill walked up Sarah's spine like ice water. It's a kind of chill you get when someone walks over your grave, as Sarah's grandmother used to say. The area code was familiar. It was from her hometown of Riverside, the small Oregon logging town where she'd grown up and couldn't wait to escape. But she'd left Riverside 10 years ago and hadn't been back, except for the obligatory Christmas visits that left her feeling hollow and anxious. I'm sorry, but I really don't know who you are. What's your last name? Emma Martinez? From Riverside High. We were lab partners in Mrs. Henderson's chemistry class. Please, you have to remember. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow, like someone had reached into her chest and squeezed her heart with a fist made of memory and guilt. Emma Martinez. Jesus Christ, Emma Martinez. How could she have forgotten Emma Martinez? But even as the name registered, Sarah found herself struggling to conjure a clear image of the girl. It was like trying to remember a dream after you've been awake for an hour. You know something was there, something important, but the details keep slipping away like smoke through your fingers. She got out of bed and opened her laptop, typed Emma Martinez Riverside High into Google with fingers that had developed a tremor. The search results made her stomach drop through the floor. Riverside Gazette. December 15th, 2009. Local teen missing after school dance, Emma Martinez. 17, was last seen leaving the Riverside High School winter formal on December 12th, 2009. Her car was found abandoned in the school parking lot the following morning. Police are treating this as a missing person case and are asking anyone with information to come forward. Martinez was reportedly upset about something that happened at the dance. Witnesses say she left alone around 10:30 p.m. after speaking with several classmates near the gymnasium exit. Emma was a quiet girl, but she was well-liked, said Principal Robert Chen, no relation to this reporter. We're all hoping for her safe return. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Riverside Police Department. Sarah stared at the article, and slowly, like a photograph developing in a dark room, memories began to surface. Emma Martinez. Quiet Emma with the dark hair and the nervous smile. Emma, who always sat in the back of chemistry class. Emma, who was Sarah's lab partner for half of junior year. Emma, who had been her friend. Emma, who had needed her help, who she had abandoned. Sarah's phone buzzed. You remember now, don't you? That night, what happened at the dance. And suddenly, she did remember the memories flooding back like water. Through a broken dam, and with them came the guilt that she'd been carrying around for 15 years without even knowing. Why? The guilt that had made it impossible for her to form lasting relationships. The guilt that had sent her to therapy and made her feel like she was missing some essential piece of herself. Because she was missing a piece of herself. She was missing the piece that had been capable of real friendship, real loyalty, real love. She'd left that piece behind in the parking lot of Riverside High School on December 12th, 2009, when she'd chosen her own social status over helping someone who needed her. December 12th, 2009, the winter formal. Sarah could see it all now with the terrible clarity that comes with suppressed memories finally breaking free. She'd been 17, wearing a blue dress that her mother had bought at the outlet mall. The kind of dress that was trying too hard to be sophisticated and failing. She'd been dating Tyler Morrison, the sheriff's son, which had felt like winning some kind of social lottery at the time. Emma had been there too, wearing a dress that was obviously homemade, her dark hair pinned up in a style that would have been pretty if she'd had the confidence to carry it off. But Emma never had confidence, not the kind that mattered in high school anyway. She was smart. Smarter than Sarah, smarter than most of their classmates. But in high school, intelligence was just another way to be different, and different was dangerous. Sarah remembered seeing Emma in the bathroom during the dance, crying over the sink while other girls primped and gossiped around her. Emma had looked up when Sarah came in, hope flickering in her eyes like a candle flame in the wind. "Sarah," Emma had said, her voice thick with tears. "Thank God. I need to talk to someone. Something's wrong. These guys, they've been following me around all night, saying things ... But before Emma could finish, Jessica Williams had burst through the bathroom door, drunk on stolen wine and teenage cruelty. "My God, Emma, are you crying? What's wrong now?" Jessica had said it in that particular way that teenage girls perfect. The way that turns concern into mockery with just a shift in tone. And Sarah, 17-year-old Sarah, who was still trying to figure out where she fit in the complex social hierarchy of Riverside High, had made a choice. She'd chosen Jessica's approval over Emma's friendship. She'd chosen to be popular over being decent. "I'm sure it's nothing," Sarah had said, the words tasting like poison in her mouth even as she spoke them. Emma's just being dramatic. The look on Emma's face, the betrayal, the hurt, the desperate realization that she was truly alone, would haunt Sarah's dreams for the next 15 years, even though she'd trained herself not to remember where the dreams came from. Emma had left the bathroom without another word. Later in the parking lot, Sarah had seen Emma standing by her car, an old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a bumper sticker that said, "Coexist," in letters made from religious symbols. Emma had been looking around like she was waiting for someone, and for a moment, Sarah had thought about going over to her, thought about apologizing, thought about being the friend that Emma needed. But Tyler had been there, and Jessica, and Mike Santos, and all the other kids whose approval Sarah had been desperately seeking. They'd been laughing about something, probably at someone's expense, and Sarah had made another choice. She'd gotten into Tyler's car and driven away, leaving Emma alone in that parking lot with whatever had been waiting for her in the darkness. Emma Martinez had disappeared that night, and for 15 years, Sarah had trained herself not to remember why she felt guilty every time she heard about a missing person on the news. Why she couldn't watch movies about kidnapping. Why she'd moved as far away from Riverside as she could manage. Her phone buzzed again. "You left me alone with them, in the parking lot. Do you remember what happened next?" Sarah's hands were shaking as she typed. "Emma, I'm so sorry. We should have helped you, but I don't understand. Who are they? And how are you texting me? The article says you disappeared in 2009. Missing, not dead. Not at first. They kept me alive for a long time, Sarah. A very long time. Who are they? The men who were waiting. The ones who had been watching me for weeks. The ones who knew that no one would miss me if I disappeared. They were almost right." Sarah Googled Emma Martinez missing, Riverside, Oregon, and found more articles. Search had continued for months, then tapered off. There had been some leads. A gas station attendant thought he'd seen her getting into a van with two men. A hunter had found some of her clothing near the old logging roads, but nothing concrete. The case had gone cold. "Where did they take you?" The old Miller warehouse? Building 3? Basement level? They had a room set up down there. Soundproof. They'd done this before. Sarah found the Miller warehouse on Google Maps. It was on the outskirts of Riverside, an abandoned textile facility that had been scheduled for demolition multiple times, but somehow kept getting reprieved. The satellite images showed a complex of deteriorating buildings surrounded by overgrown fields. Emma, if you're really alive, I can call the police and get help. I'm not alive, Sarah. Haven't been for years. But I'm not gone either. Death isn't what they tell you it is. It's not an ending. Sometimes it's just a different kind of beginning. Sarah's phone screen flickered, and when it stabilized, there was a new message with an attached photo. The image was dark and grainy, but unmistakable. A figure in the rotting remains of a formal dress, sitting in what appeared to be a concrete room. Face was mostly hidden by long, matted hair, but Sarah could see pale skin and dark eye sockets staring directly at the camera. Do you recognize the dress? My mother spent 3 weeks making it for me. She wanted me to feel beautiful. Sarah dropped her phone, her heart hammering against her ribs like a bird trying to escape a cage. When she picked it up again, there were more messages. They kept me in that room for 4 years. Sarah, 4 years of hoping someone would come looking. 4 years of believing that my friends would remember me, would miss me, would care enough to search. But you didn't, did you? You trained yourself to forget me. You moved away and built a new life and pretended that Emma Martinez never existed. Do you know what it's like to die slowly, knowing that you've been forgotten? Do you know what it's like to realize that you mattered so little that people could just erase you from their memories? Sarah was crying now, tears streaming down her face, as 15 years of suppressed guilt came flooding back. She typed with trembling fingers, "I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry. I was 17 and scared and stupid. I wanted to fit in so badly that I betrayed the best friend I ever had." Best friend? The message came back immediately. Is that what you think we were? And then Sarah remembered more, and the memories were like knives cutting through her carefully constructed amnesia. Emma hadn't just been her lab partner. They'd been close, really close. Emma had been the one who'd helped Sarah through her parents' divorce, who'd listened to her cry about Tyler Morrison, who'd been there during Sarah's worst panic attacks. Emma had been more than a friend. Emma had been the person who'd understood Sarah better than anyone else in the world. And Sarah had thrown that away for the approval of people whose names she could barely remember now. "You were everything to me," Sarah typed. "You were my best friend, my closest friend, my only real friend. And I abandoned you when you needed me most. I'm so sorry, Emma. I hate myself for what I did." Good. Because I want you to carry that hate forever. I want it to eat at you the way loneliness ate at me in that basement. I want you to understand what forgetting someone costs. Sarah's phone screen flickered again, and this time the photo was clearer. Emma's face was visible now, gaunt, pale, but unmistakably the girl from high school. She was holding up a piece of cardboard with today's date written on it. I want you to see what abandonment looks like, what betrayal costs, what happens when you choose your reputation over someone's life. But Emma, I'll do anything. I'll tell everyone what happened. I'll make sure you're remembered. It's too late for that, but there is something you can do. What? Jessica Williams lives in Salem now. She's married, has 2 kids, works as a dental hygienist. She posts pictures of her family on Facebook and talks about how blessed she is. Tyler Morrison took over his father's construction business. He's divorced, drinks too much, but he's got a reputation as a good guy who helps out at the local youth center. Mike Santos is a real estate agent in Portland. successful, drives a BMW, lives in one of those condos overlooking the river. Sarah's blood went cold. What do you want me to do? I want you to remind them. I want you to send them my photos and make them remember what they chose to forget. I want them to see what their indifference cost. And then you wait. Wait for what? The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times before the response came. Death changed me, Sarah. It stripped away everything that made me weak. Everything that made me forgive people who didn't deserve forgiveness. I spent 4 years dying slowly, 15 years learning how to reach out from whatever place the dead go when they have work to finish. I'm stronger now, can do things I never could when I was alive, and I have all the time in the world to balance the scales. What do you mean you'll find out? But first you need to make the calls. You need to send the photos. You need to make them remember Emma Martinez. Sarah stared at her phone, horror creeping up her spine like ice water. Part of her wanted to believe this was some elaborate hoax, but she knew it wasn't. The guilt she'd been carrying, the dreams she'd been having, the way she'd unconsciously avoided anything that reminded her of high school. It all made sense now. Ouch. She looked up Jessica, Tyler, and Mike on social media. They were all there, living their ordinary lives, posting pictures of their kids and their vacations and their gym workouts. None of them had ever mentioned Emma Martinez. They'd all succeeded in forgetting her completely. Sarah spent the next hour crafting messages to each of them, attaching the photos Emma had sent her. Her hands shook as she typed. We need to talk. It's about Emma Martinez. She's been trying to reach us. As she hit send on each message, Sarah felt like she was setting some terrible machine in motion. Like she was the first domino in a line that would topple in ways she could unpredict or control. Her phone buzzed one more time. Thank you, Sarah. Now we can really begin. But when Sarah opened her messages, there was nothing new there. The conversation with Emma showed no new texts. The last message was still Emma thanking her. Sarah checked the timestamp on the mysterious message, showed as being sent 3 minutes in the future. The temperature in her apartment seemed to drop 20 degrees. Outside her window, the rain had stopped. But Sarah could hear something else now. The sound of water dripping, like someone walking in wet clothes. The sound was coming from inside her apartment. She followed the sound to her bathroom and found wet footprints on the tile floor. Small footprints, like those of a teenage girl. The prints led from the bathroom door to the mirror above the sink where they simply stopped. Sarah looked in the mirror and saw her own reflection, and something else. Standing behind her was a figure in a rotting formal dress. Dark hair hanging in wet strands, hollow eyes that held 15 years of accumulated anger and pain. Thank you for remembering me, the figure said, and its voice was like the sound of water gurgling down a drain. You'll never be able to forget me again. Sarah spun around. Ah! But there was nothing there except the wet footprints and the smell of decay. When she looked back in the mirror, the figure was gone, but written in the condensation on the glass was a single word. Soon. Sarah didn't sleep that night, or the next, because every time she closed her eyes, she could see Emma Martinez standing at the foot of her bed, patient as death, waiting for something that Sarah was afraid to understand. The calls started coming the next evening. Jessica was first, hysterical and babbling. Sarah, what the hell did you send me? My daughter keeps saying there is a sad lady in a wet dress standing in her room at night. And yesterday I found muddy footprints leading from our front door to her bedroom. But it hasn't rained in days, and the mud smells like death, Sarah. Like something that's been buried and dug up. Tyler called an hour later, his voice slurred with alcohol and fear. I don't know what kind of sick joke this is, but my radio keeps playing that song from our winter formal, Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper, over and over again. Even when the radio's turned off. Even when I disconnect the battery. And there are handprints on all my windows, Sarah. Small handprints, like a teenage girl's. And they're always on the inside. Mike was the last to call, and his voice was barely above a whisper. She's in my house. Sarah, Emma. I can see her reflection in the mirrors, but when I turn around, there's nothing there, and my computer... It keeps opening to the same webpage, the newspaper article about her disappearance. Over and over again. I can't make it stop. Sarah listened to their terror with a mixture of fear and grim satisfaction. Emma was keeping her promise. They were all going to remember now. But as the days passed and the supernatural occurrences escalated, electronics malfunctioning, cold spots that followed them around, the constant feeling of being watched by malevolent eyes, Sarah began to understand that Emma's plan went far beyond simple reminders. The final message came exactly 1 week after the first, at 11:47 p.m., on another rainy Tuesday night. It was a photo of 4 people standing in what appeared to be the basement of an abandoned warehouse. Sarah recognized Jessica, Tyler, Mike, and herself, but they looked wrong, pale, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes they'd had on the night of the winter formal 15 years ago. Below the photo was a single line of text. The dance isn't over. See you soon. Your old friend, Emma. Sarah stared at the photo, her blood turning to ice water as she realized it was a manipulated image or some kind of Photoshop creation. It was a prediction, a promise, an invitation. Because in the photo she could see herself clearly, wearing the blue dress from the winter formal. The dress that was hanging in the back of her mother's closet 200 miles away in Riverside. The dress she hadn't worn or thought about in 15 years. Her phone showed the time. 11:47 p.m. Outside, the car engine started by itself. Her car, sitting in the apartment complex parking lot, its lights cutting through the rain like accusing fingers. Sarah knew where the car wanted to take her, where Emma was waiting, where all of this had been leading from the moment she'd chosen popularity over loyalty. Reputation over friendship, her own comfort over another person's desperate need. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror one last time. In the reflection, just for a moment, she could see Emma Martinez standing behind her, exactly as she'd looked at 17. Beautiful and sad and infinitely patient. Sorry, Sarah whispered to the reflection. Emma smiled. It wasn't a forgiving smile. It was the smile of someone who had learned that forgiveness was a luxury the dead couldn't afford. Sarah picked up her car keys and walked outside into the rain as she drove toward the highway that would take her back to Riverside, back to the Miller warehouse, back to the basement where Emma Martinez had learned that death was not an ending, but a transformation. Her phone buzzed with one final message. Welcome home, Sarah. We've been waiting for you. But Sarah Chen was never reported missing, because by morning, no one could remember that she'd ever existed at all. Her apartment was found empty. Her job assumed she'd quit without notice. Her few friends thought they remembered someone named Sarah, but couldn't quite place her face or recall her last name. It was as if Sarah Chen had simply been erased from the world, forgotten as completely as Emma Martinez had been 15 years before. But in the basement of the Miller warehouse, in a room that shouldn't exist, according to the building's blueprints, 4 figures sat in chairs arranged in a circle around a 5th chair. The chair where Emma Martinez had spent 4 years dying slowly, while the world forgot she existed. 4 figures were perfectly preserved, trapped forever at 17 years old. Wearing the clothes they'd worn to their winter formal, they would sit there for eternity, remembering what they'd chosen to forget, understanding at last the weight of abandonment and the cost of indifference. And in the center of the circle, Emma Martinez smiled her patient smile and began planning her next invitation. Because there were so many others who needed to remember. Teachers who hadn't noticed when she'd stopped coming to class. Family members who'd given up searching too soon. Police officers who'd let her case go cold. Social workers who'd dismissed her reports of being followed. Emma Martinez had learned that death was just the beginning of a very long conversation about the nature of responsibility and the price of forgetting. She had eternity to teach that lesson, one person at a time, and she was a very good teacher. The patient kind. The kind that never, ever gave up. And late at night, when the wind was right and the rain fell like tears on the roof of the Miller warehouse, people in Riverside would sometimes hear the sound of music drifting across the empty fields. The kind of music they played at high school dances, slow and sweet and infinitely sad. The dance was still going on, they said. The dance that had started on December 12, 2009, and would continue until every debt was paid, every slight remembered, every moment of cruelty balanced with an eternity of consequence. Emma Martinez was finally popular in the way that only the dead can be popular. Feared, remembered, impossible to ignore. And she was throwing the kind of party that lasted forever, the kind where no one ever got to leave.